And then, oh my god. Do we want to... Alright, so we're streaming right now. And we're going to be changing the title to 2021 forecast, but my computer is... What is it doing? It's lagging! Okay, boom. Boom. Okay. 2021... Okay, so 2021 forecast. I apologize for everyone that's in the room waiting. We're about to get started. Just give me 1 second. I'm actually going to... I feel like the same shit is happening. Okay. So, video, we need the audio to come in as well. Audio input, boom. Device, Blue Yeti. We got that right there. I'm just going to see if I can... Oh, I'm on mute. There we go. This would help a lot. Hold on. All right. Boom, bam. I think people on YouTube can hear me. I think they should be able to. If I switch into readings, this should actually be above here. Wait, how do I... Boom. All right, there we go. Okay. So I can kind of bounce back and forth between here. And I'm going to be also looking, so if you are interested and just have like questions and stuff for people who are on Clubhouse right now, I currently just can't like invite people and talk to people just for right now. So if you do have like chats, questions, comments, definitely, I'm going to be posting this link to the live from YouTube right now. I'm going to be posting it on my Twitter. Let's see. I'm gonna just see. Okay, here we go. Oh my god, technology. How do you technology? Let me take a big sip of my fucking gallon of water that I have here. People are probably gonna think I'm crazy for this, but they already thought I was crazy anyway, so who cares? But alright, so we have our gallon of water. We have our people. I have excellent connection, it says. Thank the fucking Lord. My videos. Does it show me how to go live on... here we go. I'm gonna share this to YouTube. To Twitter, actually. Oh my god. Using like 3 devices at once is like Mercury overwhelming, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. We're live. Cast, join us on YouTube. Okay. So we have our YouTube live. What are we doing? Alright, so it says that it's going to experience buffering. Eek. That is not fun, but alright, so we are going to do that. Boom, bam, bam. Alrighty, I'm going to see if I can respond to people in the... Just look at the chat from my iPad here. I think I should be able to. We got 3 people watching in here. Perfect. Alright, so I am live in the chat. I am able to get this. I think I'm going to start recording, as in like recording the video, because I have to stream this, but then I also have to record this at the same time. I look a little bit of a mess, but that is okay. But we are going to get started now. Alright, let's see. Just drink a sip of my water first. Oh my god. I literally have a gallon of water with me, and it is insane. Okay. Let's get started. I am going to put my just thing here, and I'm just gonna sit here and pretty much talk. Alrighty. So, I'm gonna start recording in, I guess, 3, 2, 1. Hello everybody, welcome. My name is Max, and I am here delivering the 2021 astrological forecast for the year ahead. It is currently January 1st, 2:05 p.m. in Orlando, Florida, and I'm going to be recording this episode for you guys. So welcome everyone. We are currently live in Clubhouse. I would go live on Instagram right now, but I currently just don't have the devices to do all that. But welcome everyone. We are currently, it's 2021. It feels a little unreal to know that like we are actually in a year other than 2020, because in my mind I'm still in like February, and in my mind I'm still like because I think one of the big things I did this year was I opened up my consultations. And in talking to many clients this year, I've always just been kind of talking about like the transits of 2021, and it feels a little unreal that we're actually here now. Like it's actually January. Like time flies like that. And even though this year is this year is crazy. That's what we're going to talk about. Not this year, like 2021, but more of 2020 is insane. I do think this is a great opportunity to just kind of take a sigh of relief, and I want everyone on Clubhouse, on YouTube right now, I want everyone to just take a deep breath with me, and let's just take that, that tension and that stuff. I'm a Cancer moon. I like dealing with bodily things and releasing the emotions from the body. So let's take a deep breath. Let's just, come on, we're gonna hold it. Okay, we're gonna just relax here. But yes, so we are, it is 2021. There are so many things I can say about 2020. We can kind of go over and reflect a little bit about what 2020 is. And 2020 is, I want to use the word catastrophe, but at the same time, I'm thinking that 2020 was a major structural shift. And I say this just because there was a pileup of Capricorn energy that came into last year, and one of the I think some of the defining factors of last year were the Saturn-Pluto conjunction earlier in the year, January 22nd, the Saturn ingress into Aquarius, which we're going to be talking about as well this year because it's a pretty big theme going into 2021. Saturn ingress, what else do we have? We have Jupiter in Capricorn as well. Oh my god, Jupe. Jupe was really doing the Jupe last year, and I don't know. I just don't appreciate Jupe doing whatever it did last year. So, yeah, we have Jupe, and let's see what else we have. Did we have a nodal ingress? No, we didn't have a nodal ingress. Actually, no, did we? I think we did have a node change last year. I can't remember if we had a node change or not. I think we did. But yeah, so we had this, and one of the things that I kind of already was kind of seeing this coming back in 2017, 2018, I was looking just like the progression of transits, I think as we all do, just to see what's going on. Yeah, we had 6 eclipses last year. And normally, regularly, we get only 4 eclipses a year, which is going to be the case for 2021. It's a little bit of just kind of a regular schmegular. Well, it's not really regular schmegular, but in terms of the eclipse cycles that's happening, we only got 4 eclipses this year, which is a lot less chaotic than the 6 eclipses we had in 2021. Not 2021, 2020. And I'm actually, I think that's one of the big defining factors of 2020 is that there's so much rapid change and so rapid, a lot of energetic power outages that I kind of talk, I think that's what eclipses really are, is they're energetic power outages. You think about the fact that the moon is blocking the light of the sun from reaching the earth, or you think about the fact that the earth is blocking the light of the sun from reaching the moon. These are these power outages moments, and we had a lot of them last year, and it definitely felt like it. I think if anyone can go back to at least when was it, to winter, beginning of the year, in January. I don't think there was an eclipse in February, but pretty much January eclipses. Then we went into the June and July eclipses, which were really wow. But then we also just got finished with the previous 2 eclipses on November 30th and December 14th, I think it was. And we're still seeing those eclipse cycles play out going into 2021. But yeah, we have all these eclipses. I think one of the things that oh my god, so where do we even go into talking about this? I'm just trying to define 2020. I don't know. I think maybe I have to sit with 2020 just a little bit more to really define it. But it seems like, with Jupiter and Capricorn, there's this idea of lack. There's this idea of the inability to grow, the inability to expand, and expand in a way that's more that is about generosity. I think when we have there's a few ways you can interpret Jupiter and Capricorn. There's the idea of inhibition. There's the idea of I've been using the analogy of having a straitjacket where you were just kind of you were just restricted or bound to where you are. One of the things I know a lot of ancient authors and the common signification for Jupiter is freedom, and so Jupiter in the sign of Saturn, which is all about restriction, inhibition, is the lack of freedom, to do whatever we want, specifically from the government, from authority figures. I mean, if we're thinking about COVID as one of the major defining things of last year, I mean, definitely we had that as a major signature for last year. I'm also thinking about how Jupiter in Capricorn is something growing that we don't want to grow. Is like something, Jupiter magnifies wherever it goes, and so Jupiter, what is it magnifying going into 2000? What is Jupiter magnifying going into Capricorn? Well, it's magnifying the shitty aspects of one of Jupiter, but of two of Capricorn and of Saturn, because we had that Saturn. And we didn't have the Saturn Jupiter conjunction yet, which we're actually going to talk about, which is another. That's the other. That's the other major defining factor of 2020. 2020, is that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the Great Conjunction in the sign of Aquarius. And I think that because this was more of an end-of-the-year transit, we're really going to start to see these things play out, and especially going into February of 2021 as well. I think we're going to see a lot of that Jupiter-Saturn really play out. But then also with the Mercury retrograde cycles going into next year as well, that's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. Just because the Mercury retrograde cycles are going to be taking place in air signs. We're going to be having them in Aquarius, in Gemini, and in Libra. We're also going to be having those eclipses in Gemini and Sagittarius as well. We got air and fire that we're shifting the eclipses into. And I mean, we do have one eclipse in Taurus next year, a lunar eclipse in Taurus next year, which I'm going to actually talk about, which is going to be really interesting just because there's a lot of Algol significators with that. And I've been thinking a lot about Algol in the story of Medusa lately as well. And so, it's kind of, we got some shit coming up next year, but it doesn't feel as catastrophic as 2020 felt. I think a lot of us have been tired of things being in Capricorn or just in cardinal signs in general, just because of, and I don't necessarily attribute this to Saturn completely, because I think Saturn in Capricorn is really good at preserving structure. However, when it's joined with Pluto here, there's this idea of, is the structure that is being preserved, is it rotting? And I think of Pluto as this idea of something being, and I don't want to use the word transformation with Pluto, but I think of it as really a metamorphosis, a change of matter, a change in phase of matter. Just because one of the things I talk about a lot with Pluto is how on Pluto, when Pluto gets closest to the closest it'll get to the sun. Pluto's surface is made up of ice, obviously, and when it gets closest to the surface, it goes through a process called sublimation, where the surface of Pluto basically melts, but it doesn't go from solid to liquid. It goes straight from solid to gas, and this is like an intense, extreme change of phase of matter, and I think we see this a lot with Pluto transits, especially with Capricorn. I mean, we saw this. I think this was at 22 degrees of 22 degrees of Capricorn that this took place in, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And it is very much, and one of the things I'm going to kind of get into a lot more with the forecast as well, just looking at the decans, specifically with the outer planets and these outer cycles as well, just because I think decans are really going to be pivotal in understanding how these, what is the difference between, because we're going to have Uranus and Taurus. I mean, Uranus is going to be in Taurus until, I think, 2026. Neptune is going to be in Pisces until, I think it's 2025. Yeah, Neptune and Pisces until 2025. Pluto and Aquarius and Aquarius in 2024. So I think looking at the decans, looking at the bound lords for these planets, these outer planets and these outer cycles, like even Saturn and Jupiter, is going to be it's going to be a lot more rich to be able to understand. What does 2020 look like? What does this landscape look like? Because especially with these outers, they're entering new territory this year. I mean, they're going to enter new territory every year. But there's a world post 2020 and pre 2020, and right now we're kind of looking at, I think of this third decan of Capricorn that the Saturn Pluto conjunction took place in is, Saturn is all about the fabric of reality. Saturn is all about reality, obviously, but then when we also take a look at what Pluto is the destruction of that. Pluto is the intense and rapid change of that. And obviously the way and the structure of our world is has changed really rapidly in a year. I mean, we've seen a lot of memes about this. How people are like, like I know the one meme that's like circulating around is everyone's talking about how God, was like, oh, let's sprinkle these catastrophes throughout the year, and then the angels are like doing it, and then they mess up and put it all in 2020. I don't know if anyone's seen that meme or like TikTok or like the kind of skit or whatever, but it's really one of those, like, it's like there's some truth to those memes in a way, and I think in the way that Oscar Wilde talks about art is reflective of life, and life is, vice versa, whatever. I can't remember the exact quote that Oscar Wilde talks about. I think memes are a form of art. And this is just like Gen Z culture like peaking right now, but memes are definitely a form of art, and anything, all the memes that happen like reflect what's happening in real life. And so we have all these really catastrophic events crammed into 1 year, and now we have to figure out how to move past that. What's next? How do we, I think of 2021 as this really weird limbo space where it's, the storm is over, at least for part of 2021. I will say that the first half, not even first half, more the first quarter, quarter one of 2021 is like, I think of 2020 as an earthquake, and then this first quarter 2021 is the tsunami that comes after, because whenever there's an earthquake, especially in the ocean, there's going to be a tsunami that follows that. And I think that, this first quarter is that tsunami, it's that afterwave, and that aftershock. And then I think one of the main general themes of 2021 is it's realizing and trying to integrate back into normality that life can never be the same. Life can never go back to what it used to be. I think we all want life to go back to what it used to be, but there's this looming feeling that, oh no, we're not there anymore. We are, and I don't want to use the word ascending, but it's not even like ascending. There's just a directional shift in the way humanity is progressing, and whether this means ascension or not is like, and I use ascension as like a sort of joking word because I think the concept of ascension and what that is a little bit too woo-woo for me. But if we think about like the age of air, that just initiated with the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, and I should just kind of clarify, what the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in general kind of means. So Saturn and Jupiter, they're going to be conjoining every year. Saturn and Jupiter are planets that are associated with government, authority, expansion, the fabric of reality, judgment, truth, perception of reality as well. And these things are changing rapidly. And well, not even rapidly, but these things are changing. The fabric of the world changes for the next 20 years as each Jupiter-Saturn conjunction happens, the grand conjunction. The last one was in the year of 2000 in the sign of Taurus, and I wasn't even alive for that one. This is my first grand conjunction I'm experiencing because I'm only 19 out here, you know what I mean? I'm 19 years old, and I am, this is my first grand conjunction I'm experiencing. And so one thing that's also very interesting about this grand conjunction is that the grand conjunction will usually take place in the signs of the same element for around 200-ish years. And so the grand conjunction has been taking place in the earth elements for the past 200 years, with the exception of the 1981 grand conjunction that took place in the sign of Libra, which is sort of this outlier, which is a little bit of a precursor to what the next element is going to be about. I think of this as like, we get the little trailer before the actual movie takes place of what the Age of Air is going to be like. And Libra is an air sign, but for the past 200 years it's been in Earth. And I think of Jupiter and Saturn being conjoined in Earth signs as very much the idea of there's the idea of land when we're talking about Earth. I mean, it's the literal Earth. We're talking about land. We're talking about property. We're talking about money. We're talking about material. We're talking about materialization. I mean, this is the Industrial Revolution. This is, I don't want to necessarily say wars, because there's going to be wars no matter what age it is. But there's a much more focus on capitalism. I think of Earth as not necessarily a capitalistic element, but it has a lot to do with the way the world is structured, and it is about structure in general. And so, when we look at Taurus, we're looking at things that we value. We're looking at things we place value on. We're looking at the landscape, whether it be the physical beauty, like the how things look. In particular, what does society look like? When we look at Capricorn, this is what does government look like? When we look at Virgo, what does information look like? And so I think the very fact that there's been a lot of earthiness going into 2020. And also, I will say about I will also say about earthiness. The other thing is that Earth is it is immobile. The Earth does not move. You do. I mean, it'll move. Obviously we have earthquakes and stuff, but you are not experiencing your continent moving. You cannot experience that. You cannot experience a mountain moving unless you were there for that earthquake. You know what I mean? The Earth and these earthquakes happen at very variable rates, and yes, we can predict them, I guess. I forget the reason why we. Oh yeah, I remember because oh my god, I remember reading something earlier last year because of COVID that a lot of scientists, because everyone was quarantining, staying inside, at least at the beginning of quarantine, and I remember reading that a lot of people actually, like a lot of scientists, were actually able to detect very small earthquakes, just because a lot of the rumbling on the Earth, because of cars, trains, all of that, planes, whatever, was stopped. And so there was this idea of you can now, like, the Earth just kind of stopped in a way. I think that that's also a thing of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction as well. The Earth literally stopped. The world stopped, at least for a few months. And there's this, and and the reason why I'm highlighting the Saturn-Pluto conjunction as well is just because it takes place in the sign of Capricorn. This is Saturn's sign. Pluto is in Saturn's sign, and now Pluto is, directly responding to Saturn. And so Pluto is this outer planet as well. So Pluto is, when you feel Pluto, you're definitely going to feel that Pluto. You're definitely going to feel the intense, rapid change. You're also going to, you're going to feel the metamorphosis and the transformation that comes with Pluto. And so what kind of change is this in terms of the world? And when we talk about outers in general, we're talking about things that affect society. We're talking about things that affect groups of people. We're not talking about things that affect people, like specifically, like at least in mundane astrology. We're not talking about things that affect people on a personal level, because while Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune can affect people on personal levels, their effects in mundane astrology are a little bit more universal. They're talking about the general tone and the undertones of what's going on for a general, like, decade long periods of time. When we talk about Pluto and Saturn, Pluto is in the sign of Saturn. Saturn is all about stopping, especially in Capricorn. It's all about restriction. It's all about limitation. It's all about those boundaries. It's all about, we are not moving. We are digging our heels in, and there is the laying the foundation of structure, and that is immobile. I think of Capricorn as a skyscraper, is that you have to make sure that skyscraper does not topple over. That way, it doesn't, harm anyone. I think there needs to be a very solid base and a very solid foundation. And I think of Pluto coming in as, let's kind of, shake that up. I think of Pluto shaking up the system a lot. And when Pluto comes with Saturn, it's shaking up the system through stopping. And realizing, and I almost think of, Pluto is destruction as well. When you look at this deck, and I know I've been like, my brain bounces everywhere, Gemini rising, but, when you look at this decan of Capricorn, from 20 degrees of Capricorn to 2959 of Capricorn, is ruled by the Sun and Mercury. And for anyone who's an Avatar: The Last Airbender fan, I will often relate this decan to Long Feng in the Earth King. Just because there's the principle of kingliness, obviously the Earth King, but then there's also the idea with Mercury as the shady minister, who does things behind the scenes, and obviously that is Long Feng. The Earth King. It is said several times that the Earth King doesn't really have power. The Earth King is more of just a puppet or a figurehead, whereas Long Feng is actually the person who is, controlling the Dai Li and doing all of these shady things in Ba Sing Se, and. Long Feng is actually the person who is making the laws, signing them into action, and just kind of governing how the world is working. And so, one thing specifically about this decan of Capricorn is that there's often the reputation for this decan to have immense amounts of pressure be put on the people who are in these positions of authority. There is a position of authority here, and a lot of that, and a lot of shady shit coming to light as well, because I think we think of Pluto, and I didn't mention this as well, but, Pluto, it'll go from, when it goes through that process of sublimation, it's going to go straight from solid to gas, but that gas actually forms a temporary atmosphere around Pluto. And so I think of this as Pluto is really going to bring things to the surface, and it's not going to be comfortable. It's not bringing things to the surface in a comfy way, because sublimation is not comfy. And so all the shady shit that these authority figures have been doing is being brought to the surface, and really being raw and exposed. And I think, until the next Saturn-Pluto conjunction, we're really going to see that as a theme going for the next 30 years, really, because Saturn will conjoin Pluto approximately every 30 years, because that's how often it takes Saturn to go around the zodiac. And I think this next Saturn-Pluto conjunction is actually going to be taking place in the sign of Pisces, which is going to be kind of interesting, but I'm not going to get into that, because that's when Pluto goes into Pisces, and we're not even done with Pluto in Capricorn, let alone having thought about Pluto going to Aquarius. So I'm not going to delve too much into that topic there. But we have this idea of this is a theme going on for the next 30 years. Shady shit, and the existing structures of governance crumbling due to the shady shit that has been happening. And so, and I actually do want to kind of point out as well that Pluto, Saturn and Pluto also in the sign of Capricorn, this Saturn-Pluto conjunction took place in the bound of Saturn as well, the Egyptian bound of Saturn, which I think has some interesting implications that we're dealing with Saturnian themes of governance and authority in general already. And I think that, Saturn's obviously out of Capricorn. Saturn is not going to be in Capricorn for another 30 years-ish. And so, and I even think the next time Saturn is in Capricorn, I don't necessarily think it's going to be super extreme as this transit was, and the previous transit was as well, because obviously I wasn't alive, and a lot of the millennials who are currently watching also weren't alive, or they were just being born at the last time Saturn was in Capricorn. But that's also when Saturn was in Capricorn. That's also when Neptune and Uranus were also in Capricorn too. So we have these heavy outers back to back in the Saturn Capricorn cycle, and I'm pretty sure in the next Saturn Capricorn cycle we're not going to have the same outers in the sign of Capricorn, so it may be a little bit more just lax. Now, I don't even want to say lax, but it's going to be less intense. And so I'm going really far ahead into the future right now. But my whole point is to say this is 2020. I think it's important to do this reflection on what 2020 is. What did 2020 bring? This is the start of the decade. How are we setting the tone going forward for 2021, 22, 23, 24, so on and so forth? And just kind of thinking about the 2020s in general, if the 1920s were steampunk, I think of the 2020s as cyberpunk. And I think of this as I don't know. I think of the 2020s as cyberpunk, just because we are entering the age of air now, one. But we are also entering a period in which, like I said, this is we have a lot of outer shifts that are coming. The last time we had outer shifts were, the most recent one actually has just been Uranus entering Taurus in 2018. Before that, the most recent outer shift was Neptune in 2012. It entered Pisces. And then the outer shift prior to that was Pluto entering Capricorn in 2008. And this is just very interesting. That we're having this second, this next wave of outer shifts going into 2020, especially mid-decade. When we go into 2024, we get Pluto going into, we get that preview in 2023. But going 2024, we get Pluto moving into Aquarius. 2025, I'm pretty sure we get Neptune going into Aries. Then we also get in 2026, we have Uranus going into Gemini as well. And so we have a lot of different, this is really like a tone shift. Things are changing this year. Not even this year, things are changing this decade. And I think kind of the general vibe I've noticed is people understand that life cannot be the same anymore. But I don't think we actually understand how we're going to integrate that into the way we live our lives, because we've been caught in quarantine right now. It's literally a Saturn in Capricorn thing. And even a little bit of a Saturn and Aquarius thing too, is that there's this idea of distance, and there's this idea of the lack of connection between people as well, because there are things that are blocking that connection, whether it be societal codes, morals. I'm thinking of Saturn and and Aquarius as very much the social contract. Why are we not being connected now? There's this idea of there is a lot of disconnect. And truthfully, I don't know. Saturn does function better in Aquarius. I will say that, because Saturn is a diurnal planet, and Saturn functions a lot more constructively in a diurnal sign because the coldness of Saturn is mitigated by the heat of diurnality. But when we kind of talk about Aquarius, I think of this as this is really it's the social contract. It is connection. It is social. It is the social code of ethic. It is what is the how are we I think of this as the interactions we have with each other that are not explicitly stated, but there's a certain way to act. I think of it as culture in a way. Aquarius is very much what is the culture of how we connect to each other. What are the things that in the boundaries we cannot cross? Because obviously public nudity, we're not going to be, I'm not going to be slinging my pee-pee out in the street because that's just not publicly accepted. And it's not something, what guidelines of interactions do we have to make sure we can maintain those interactions? I'm thinking that this new age of air, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction is now taking place in the signs of air signs for the next 200 years, starting with this grand conjunction that happened on December 21st in Aquarius. I think of this as revolutionizing the way we connect to each other, but also making life a lot more digital, making life a lot more connected in not in reality, but more in because I don't necessarily want to say that not in reality, because air can be a not necessarily a realistic sign, but it's one of those elements that connects people, but it's off of the ground. And if you kind of think of the order in the spheres of the elements, it's Earth comes first, because obviously we're standing on the Earth. Then it comes water, because water is more, I think it's less dense, I can't remember, but water, it sinks. Our Earth is Earth, so the water is just going to be placed on top of that Earth. In general, it's going to sink further down and down. So there's this idea of gravity associated with earth and water, but then when we go into looking at air and fire, these are elements that rise. Air is off the ground, and so is fire. And so there's this idea of reality and the very fabric of reality moving away from being connected, but by connectivity being in earthiness, but being more in airiness. And when I think of air, this is technology. Now it's technology. One of the big things that's even going to be coming up for 2021 is we're having the Saturn return of the internet. This is the Saturn return of literally the thing that has revolutionized the way we connect to each other. And there needs to be some upgrades. There needs to be some reintegration. There needs to be some changes going on here. What does this structure look like? Is it sustainable? I think one of the things I kind of have a fear of in general is the internet going to last? Is technology going to last? How sustainable is technology? Can we control what happens on Earth? I don't think we've mastered the way weather works to the point where technology can be sustainable. And I think it's going to be taking a lot to really do that. I also kind of think of the age of air as leaving Earth as well. And I think of this as going to Mars. I think of this as outer planetary exploration. Maybe settling on the moon, actually forming something on the moon. And I was actually kind of thinking about this recently, how I think the age of air might come with pollution as well. Just because I think one of the things that, I can't remember who describes it in particular, but there's the idea with Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in air signs being the corruption of air, like the literal air. And so I think of this as, global warming, pollution. What are we going to do about it? How is that going to change? These are like very pressing questions. And now there's a different precedent that's going on here, because now there's a focus towards the air rather than the focus towards the earth. I think of earth as shifting away focus from money as well and materiality, and moving much more towards technology and information. And actually, there's the focus on longevity now. I think when we think about the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in the sign of Venus, the past 20 years have been all about luxury. I think it's been the height of, it's not necessarily the height of capitalism, but it's much more this, it is easy to get rich. It is easy. There's and the divide between the rich and the poor is greater than it has ever been. There's immense gaps of wealth. When we talk about Taurus, we're talking about money. We're talking about values. We're talking about Venus. We're talking about beauty as well. We're talking about art as well. And then there is less of a focus from that moving towards air, and we're going into Saturn. We're going to be dealing with Saturn, and our Saturn. We're going to be dealing with Saturn for the next 20-ish years in terms of the grand conjunction cycle, and this kind of makes me want to transition to 2021 and actually getting to talk about this astrology a little bit more, because I can go on talking about just this stuff going on for ages. 2021 and Saturn. I think Saturn is very loud this year as well, but it's loud in a very different way. Saturn in Capricorn was loud in the realization of the rotting of structures, whereas Saturn in Saturn Aquarius is, if this structure is rotting, what do we do to replace it and to refurbish and make it better? And I think of Saturn, we have Saturn and Jupiter in the same sign pretty much throughout all of the year as well, which is what happened for last year as well. For the majority of last year. There was that brief dip where Saturn did go into Aquarius, so kind of, left Jup. But then there was also this period, but then we're kind of doing that same thing next year, except Jup is leaving and Saturn's staying. And please forgive me for calling Jupiter Jup. This is Jup, you know what I mean? Jup is, and I think that's I think Jupiter in Aquarius is a lot more constructive than Jupiter in Capricorn. I will say that, because we're going from a dignity change. We're going from a planet in its depression and being depressed to a planet that is not necessarily. It's peregrine. It doesn't have a home in, the sign of Aquarius, but it's like the nature of air is that it is hot and wet. And the nature of Jupiter is also hot and wet. So there is a elemental affinity that goes on with Jupiter in Aquarius. And so it is not as restrictive as Jupiter in Capricorn is, where Jupiter is estranged in the sign of Capricorn. It is estranged from doing the things that it wants to do, which is offer benevolence. Jupiter was acting functionally malefic going in 2020. Jupiter and Saturn in the same sign, with Jupiter acting more constructively benefic in a way, makes Saturn acting constructively benefic. Has Jupiter also act constructively benefic as well, because it's released from that dignity change, but it's also its ruler and its lord is not uncomfy. Even though Saturn isn't uncomfy in Capricorn, Saturn is very strong in Capricorn. It is not destructive as destructive in Aquarius. And Jup's going into Pisces next year. I think that's something to go, I think that's really exciting, truthfully. And one of the things I think about Jupiter and Pisces is that it is this idea of hugs. It's this idea of, wow, I can embrace you now. There's this idea of things being able to mesh together now. Jupiter and Capricorn, there is division, there is separation, there is something that is blocking us from having our own freedom. There is a much greater sense of, oh my god, not my hairy legs. There is a much greater sense of freedom going into 2021. However, that freedom quickly becomes questioned once Jupiter enters Pisces and then retrogrades back into Aquarius mid-year. I think I want to say the third quarter of 2021. Jupiter will retrograde back into Aquarius, and there's this feeling of, I'm going to embrace you, but now that was a mistake. Now there is something that must be done about this, and something that was overlooked. And something that was overlooked that was particularly harmful. And I only say this just because as Jupiter goes back into Aquarius, Mars is going to oppose it. Now let's talk about the Saturn-Uranus square, because I think that's the other defining thing of 2021. Saturn-Uranus. It is very similar to Saturn-Pluto, in my opinion. Just because Pluto is this extreme change. But Uranus, Pluto does it in a little bit more. I feel like it's much more of a process with Pluto, whereas Uranus is much more abrupt. Uranus is much more revolutionary. Uranus is much more... I think of Uranus very much like a volcano. And that it is the idea of there's this eruption that happens. And it's not that... I guess volcanoes can kind of be a little bit unpredictable. But they're not completely unpredictable. I don't think Uranus... Uranus definitely can be unpredictable. And I'm not going to diminish Uranus's value there. Not value, but signification there. But I think it's very easy to feel when there is tension rising. And I think based on the existing structures that need to be reformed and the ones that have been rotting going into that have been highlighted in 2020, how there is the need for abrupt and radical change that comes with that, with Uranus going into Taurus. And I think 2021 is that year where we do see abrupt, radical change as a theme going throughout the year, where there are these periods where structures, whether it be social structures or just written law. I think of Saturn as like Saturn in Aquarius as like written laws or written constitutions or information that is being revamped, that is being radically changed, almost destroyed. This makes me think of, let's throw the social conventions that we had out the window and make something new. And I think a lot of people will talk about Aquarius. I see this specifically from a lot of traditional astrologers, that they'll talk about how Aquarius isn't super... it's not so much associated with change. But I think Aquarius is the most changeable fixed sign that we have. Because yes, Aquarius is a fixed sign, but it's also an air sign. So there is this come and go with the wind as well. There may be structure to that wind, but that wind is still moving. I think of Aquarius as almost like I think of it very much as a hurricane. Is that there is a structure to that hurricane. Obviously, it's moving in a circular motion. It has an eye, and it is very forceful and it is very powerful, which is very Saturnian. It's on the nose for that, and it can be destructive as well. And so I think of this as Aquarius is fixed wind. It is fixed air. Also stale air as well, which can also be another thing to kind of think of. I don't know, I'm just playing around with the significations here. Where am I going with this? Yeah, so we're talking about Saturn Uranus, that's right. But I also think about, Uranus and Taurus. I think Uranus entered Taurus in 2018, but we haven't really had so much Uranus action. Uranus I think of, I don't know if anyone's played Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, but there's this Pokemon called Regigigas, and his hidden ability, well, not his hidden ability, but his ability is slow starting. I think of Uranus and Taurus as slow starting. It is not something that you're going to feel right away, but once the certain activations of those transits do happen, it's like, boom, oh shit, it's happening, we're here. And so with that being said, I think we are getting that, we're going to see a lot of what Uranus and Taurus is about this year in particular. I think we did get a preview last year as well, just because we had that Venus retrograde in Gemini, and Uranus's ruler was Venus, and so we definitely got to see a lot of the abrupt changes in how we relate to each other, and what does peace look like? Or actually, what does the illusion... I think of Uranus and Taurus as breaking the illusion of peace. And I talk about that with Mars and Taurus in particular, and I think that's also going to be a major thing going into the start of the year, is because it is currently January 1st, but once we get to January 6th, when Mars enters Taurus, Mars in Taurus is breaking the illusion that there is peace and that things are tranquil. Mars is saying, look, not everything is fine and dandy and fun and peachy here. Like, there's some shit that's happening here. And then there's some chaos. I think of a James Baldwin quote in particular, specifically just because this is ruled by Venus, so it kind of makes sense as well. Is that the quote in particular is, "Art is here to prove that all safety is an illusion. The crime you discover yourself guilty of is not so much that you are aware, but others see that you are and cannot bear to watch it, because it testifies to the fact that you are bearing witness to something which everyone knows, but nobody wants to accept. Everyone's hurt. What's important, what drives you, what torments you, is that you use this to connect with everyone else alive. Artists are here to disturb the peace." And that is by James Baldwin, and I think this is one of these quotes that is a very much Uranus and Taurus theme, is that art is here to disturb the peace, and Uranus is very much a disruptor. Uranus is not here to make things calm. Uranus is not here to, Uranus is really here to disturb the peace. And what does peace even look like? What does justice look like? If there's no justice, there is no peace. And I think of the Venus retrograde in particular being one of last year, is that was very much highlighted through the murder of George Floyd and all of the other riots that took place as a result of that. And I think we are going to see a lot more riots coming forward as people start to become more intolerant of injustice. And it's not, and I don't even want to say that people are becoming more intolerant, but I think there's the much more extroversion of that intolerance in a very radical and violent way. And I think of this as, one thing that I have to pull up their Twitter account, because I want to make sure I'm saying their name correctly. But at West Desert Rose on Twitter I think it was in around QAC in. I don't remember what that was. I think that was in July of 2020. But one of the things they talked about was that these transits seem very scary. That when we talk about catastrophe, we talk about apocalyptic things, whatever. One of the points that they brought up was, whose apocalypse is this? This can be very scary for people who have abused their power, specifically white people in positions of power. This can be very scary for people who think that they can get away with using capitalism as a method of oppression. This can be very scary for people who are abusive people in positions of power that affect millions of people. However, this apocalypse is not people who have been marginalized apocalypse. It is the liberation of those people. And it is the liberation of, and I don't necessarily want to say like 2021 is going to liberate everyone and make everyone, free, because that's just not realistic. That does not happen in a year. But it is definitely, there is a lot more push for that to happen. And in a way that is very much about dismantling existing structures in the world. And I think of Aquarius as not, I don't necessarily think of it as a revolutionary sign, but I think of it as a sign of change, which is what I was kind of going back to before, is if you look at the decans of Aquarius, the first decan of Aquarius is ruled by Venus and Saturn, and it is the rejection of societal values in pursuit of something that is unknown and something that is outside of the mainstream convention. Then when you go into the second decan of Aquarius, it is all about building the bridge between what is known and what is unknown, and it is literally the concept of building bridges, which is double ruled by Mercury. It is pathways and pathways of I think of it as the pathways between dimensions, almost kind of like I think of Avatar. It's like the Avatar, Aang, Korra, whoever, Kyoshi, Roku. They are the bridge between the material and the spirit world. There's this idea of bridges and connections between things that are inaccessible and unknown, unbeknownst to other people, and things that are known already. It is the connection between the the known and the unknown. And then when you go into the third decan of Aquarius, this is the returning back to convention, only to realize that that convention is not comforting, and it is not. I don't know the word. I don't want to use the word sustainable, but knowing that convention is not in alignment with what makes one comfortable or with what one values. And that decan is also ruled by the Moon and Venus as well. And I think of, Saturn traversing. I mean, Saturn's going to go through the first decan of Aquarius. And we kind of got a little bit of a preview of that going in 2021. And I think it's also just kind of interesting looking at the bound lords of that first decan, that first part of Aquarius, because Saturn retrograded at 1 Aquarius. Saturn was in the bound of Mercury as well. Saturn was in the bound of Mercury. It was dealing with Venus and Saturn. And so there is, one of the things you can kind of think about that is like technology, but also commerce and trade, economic recession, and even depression. I mean, I think that's what we're in right now. I think of Mercury as also very much as submission as well. That's something that a lot of ancient authors talk about, which I think makes a lot of sense for Mercury, because Mercury is in this constant state where it is submitting to the sun. I did a little bit of research on my own, and I found that Mercury only has about 83 days out of 365 days out of the year where it is unafflicted from the sun. It's not in its retrogrades. There's only 83 days out of the year where Mercury is not in its retrograde cycle, and it is not under the sun's beams. And this is just, like, generally speaking, this isn't taking into account any other maltreatment or bonification from Mercury, just strictly its relationship with the sun. And so with this already, if we kind of take a look at the Lot of Necessity, one thing that Paulus Alexandria will talk about is that it's about submission, it's about... oh my god, I did a tweet on it yesterday. I have to pull it up because I tweet a lot. But I did a tweet on it yesterday where I was actually talking about the astrology of Bitcoin. And just because I know the astrology podcast, they did put out an episode on Bitcoin, and I was talking with one of my titis about it. And I was thinking, I got this idea to do Zodaku releasing with Bitcoin. I was like, oh shit. If you can, do transits, transit things, why not do Zodaku releasing with Bitcoin to kind of track the peak periods of Bitcoin or whatever? And it's actually kind of interesting because Bitcoin does go into a really, it'll go into a level 2 10th from fortune peak period, which may be very interesting, just in particular, just because that's going to activate, it's 10th from fortune, but even the Pisces period after will be where Venus in Pisces is. It looks like Bitcoin's getting some attention next year. That's not the point. But I was thinking, because I was specifically releasing from the Lot of Spirit with that, with the astrology of Bitcoin. But I was thinking, what about releasing from the Lot of Money, the Lot of commerce or trade or something of that nature? And then my mind immediately went to Mercury, because Mercury is that planet of commerce and trade. And so one of the things that Paulus Alexandria kind of talks about with the Lot of Necessity is that it has significations relating to constraints, struggles, enemies, and submissions. And so I think it's really interesting that we have Saturn. Saturn is still wrapping up its retrograde cycle. Saturn is not completely out of the woods right now. We're still, I think, the whole idea of the Saturn retrograde cycle when it entered into Aquarius and then retrograded back into Capricorn. So it was from 1 Aquarius to 25 Capricorn. This kind of talks about COVID, I really think. I think this is like the story of COVID that we've lived for the past year, and where we've had to be in this state of submission, in this state of restraint, and the state of inhibition, and when we are not allowed to socialize or connect with each other. And we are wrapping up that retrograde cycle as well, which is interesting. So I know we have vaccines rolling out and everything. Whether those vaccines are safe to use, specifically, there is a lot of one of the things I know a lot of people have concerns about is what's in the vaccine, but I think one of the things a lot of people, specifically people of color, fear is how the medicinal industry has been used, has been weaponized as a method of racism against specifically black women in the medical field. When we're talking about people getting shots and stuff, and actually what just came out recently is that I was looking at the highlights on Twitter and just the news, is that there was a lot, Wisconsin pharmacists arrested on charges of allegedly tampering with more than 500 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. I think of this as, how safe are these vaccines? What racism is embedded in these vaccines? What are the motives behind this? How safe are they? Whether moving forward, are we going to be able to connect with each other? I think that's one thing that, we're wrapping up this COVID story where we do have vaccines. However, are we actually going to be able to go back to normal? Because there is this feeling that people are a lot more aware now. And people are, and I think we kind of saw this with Saturn Uranus as well, is that there is this shocking factor to reality where people actually, the reality is very shocking. And for some, it is not shocking, but as a general consensus, the events that have happened are they're very disruptive of the status quo. And I think moving into 2021, we get the Saturn-Uranus square, but we get it in its peak this time. And so while we did have some shock factors going on into 2020, Saturn and Uranus were not completely aligned and squared throughout that year. They were in that whole sign square to each other. However, going into 2021, they will actually perfect their square 3 times next year. And it's kind of what I was talking about earlier before, is that people are, this is like a complete rebellion, it looks like. And I think it's also interesting to note that the Pluto return of the United States is going, I don't think it goes exact next year, because Pluto will only get to, let me see, I think, because I have the retrograde cycles on hand right now, Pluto is only going to get to, no, that's, oh wait, here we go, Pluto. Yeah, Pluto's only getting to 26. I'm pretty sure the birth chart of the United States is that it is, let me see, I'm going to find the Sibley chart right now. And for people watching the video version, I'm going to be sharing this as well. Let me just kind of move this. Boom. I'm just trying to get my video capture set up. Here we go. All right. Yeah, so for those watching the video version over here, we can see that I had to actually change I have it set to 0 Aries, because when I do transit, I set everything to like 0 Aries. Let's see. Apply. Yeah, so we have a Neptune, actually no, whoops, displayed points. Let me go to modern astrology. Yeah, we have Pluto at 2733, so Pluto is actually not going to be getting there just yet in the Sibley chart, but that Pluto return to the United States is definitely going to be interesting to see how that builds up further, especially with that Saturn-Uranus square. And I mean, nothing in the United States, like, there isn't that much fixed energy in the United States' chart as apart from that Aquarius moon. So there really isn't going to be too much that is being loud within the fixed energy of this year. I think the reason why the United States was really had so much of an abrupt change in 2021 is just the immense amount of cardinal activity that was taking place. Specifically opposing the Cancer stellium, squaring that Saturn in Libra, but then also conjoining that the Saturn Pluto the Pluto in Capricorn as well. And one of the things that's very interesting to think about with the United States is the fact that empires traditionally last. The length of average length of an empire is around 250 years. And it takes Pluto 250 years to go around the zodiac. These are some interesting thoughts to kind of think about. What does the future of and I think that's what we're going to kind of be looking at as a general consensus for Saturn being in Aquarius. What does reality look like? Some people, when we're talking about, people talk about, oh my god, that is a huge ass vulture and it better not come near me. Oh my god, I think I was like feared for my life, because that vulture's head is ugly as hell. Anyway, one of the things that I think about with, people, like I've talked about, like politics with like friends and family, is like, yeah, I hope, Biden is in office, whatever, then, things will go back to normal. And I'm like, yeah, if there even is a United States, truthfully, is the United States, that is something that is a feasible reality moving forward? Is this something that is actually Is this something that is actually going, is this part of reality now? I mean, we have this Pluto return coming up. We have Uranus and Gemini coming up, which is the Uranus return of the United States, because United States has Uranus and Gemini. I think one of the things that we're going to be finding a lot going into next year is that there is this spark of change that comes. And it is also consistent as well. It is very much consistent change, just because this is fixed energy as well. And it seems like a lot of the fire that has been sparked last year is carried forward into 2021. But I think the more pressing issue is that we're going to have to kind of be dealing with is what, how do we first are able to interact with each other without this virus killing everyone. I think that's one of the very important questions moving forward. Is how, specifically, what does reality look like after COVID? I'm thinking a lot about sanitization, truthfully. The idea of dirtiness, and how there's going to be a focus next year towards cleanliness. And oh my God, like we can't live the, like I grew up in New York. I just recently moved to Florida in 2020, not by my own volition. And one of the things I in living in New York that, it's just such a culture shock coming here, because things are a lot cleaner here. Literally the air smells better here. What does cleanliness look like going into 2021? And I also think of Uranus and Taurus, low-key thinking about cleaning, what feels nice, what feels good, and what sort of realities feel good. How does the reality that we are currently living in with Saturn and Aquarius contest the what feels good and radical self-care? I think radical self-care is also Uranus and Taurus. That's going to be amping up a lot more as well, and we'll see that as a bigger theme going into 2021 as well. Is what does radical self-care look like? And that looks like by challenging existing structures of society, and challenging the existing structures of authority, and implementing new ones and new structures that enable people to have a sense of freedom and a sense of personal autonomy, rather than feeling like they are subjected to the brutal nature of capitalism. I think I do think there's a push away from capitalism moving in 2021. I think that this push is much more centered towards community. And we kind of do see that as an Aquarian theme in general, and just a Saturnian theme as well, is that these are groups of people. These are, I think of Saturn, and specifically the reason why I say groups of people is just because the sun is the individual. The sun is, it is the center of the galaxy, the galaxy universe, not even universe, the solar system, whatever. Center of the solar system. It's all about me, me, me. And no offense to the Leos, but it is all about me, me, me. And when you think about Saturn being the opposite of Leo, it is not about me, me, me. There is this hyper awareness of the things that exist outside of the self, and the people that exist outside of the self, and thus the personality is inhibited, and the individuality is the individuality is inhibited because of the perception of other people, and this hyper awareness of otherness, and how there is more than just it's literally the world does not revolve around you, as Saturn. And I think when we go into 2021, having especially Jupiter here, there's this focus on let's bring everyone together. Not even let's bring everyone together. Let's bring these groups of people together. Let's form tribes. Let's form community. What does community building look like, and how does that challenge the Saturn and Saturn square Uranus? How does that challenge the existing structures and things we place value on as a society? Just had to take a water break. So let's see. Saturn Uranus. I could talk about that for years. I briefly touched on Uranus and Pisces. Let's talk about these eclipses really quickly. I mean, like I said, we had these 4 eclipses, but I think one of the things is, we kind of phased out the Gemini. We phased out the Cancer eclipses last year with that nodal ingress. We had those Cancer eclipses going into the beginning of the year, Capricorn eclipse. Then we also had the Cancer eclipse and Capricorn eclipse in the summer. So then we had the June 5th Gemini Sagittarius eclipse. Then we have these 2 eclipses, the November 30th, December 14th, 2020 eclipses. Now we are getting a full year, almost a full year of Gemini Sag eclipses, where cardinal eclipses have now been phased out. And so we're dealing with Gemini Sag, we're dealing with change. We're dealing with the North Node in Gemini, the South Node in Sagittarius. And the North Node is actually exalted in Gemini. Only because if you want to exalt the nodes, the whole reason why the North Node is exalted in Gemini is because when the moon is exalted in Taurus, it is moving in an upward and increasing motion, and it is in a state of increase when the nodes are in Gemini, because the North Node represents the point where the moon is when the moon conjoins the North Node, it increases in latitude, whereas when it conjoins the South Node, it decreases in latitude. And so there is this association with Gemini and Sag of increase and decrease, just the fact of daylight. This is when we are increasing to maximum daylight during Gemini, and we get to maximum daylight at 0 degrees of Gemini, at 0 degrees of Cancer, when the sun gets to 0 degrees of Cancer, which is the summer solstice. And then we get to we're decreasing in light when we get to Sagittarius, where when the sun hits 0 Capricorn, it is at the lowest amount of the night is the longest it can be, and the days are the shortest they can be. So nodes are exalted. North Node in Gemini. We're gonna see a lot of this start to. I think what's kind of interesting is that the nodes will actually. Let me kind of pull up on the video. Oh my God. I clicked reverse by accident. I did not mean to click reverse because I don't like the way I look on this side. Oh my God. Okay, transform. Oh no, I'm upside down now. Oh no, my God. Okay, I'm doing things I don't mean to do them. Okay. Vertical. Okay, there we go. Okay, I think everyone just kind of had like a little bit of. Oh my God, this is so Gemini. Okay. Here we go. We're back. All right. Yeah, I don't remember my hotkeys to I don't remember my hotkeys to switch. This is not fun. Okay, what are my hotkeys? I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, everyone. Okay, switch the scene. Boom. I'm gonna go to. How do I go here? Okay. How do I switch to that? How do I switch to this? Oh my God. I'm just trying to pull up the shit. Please, come on. Like, oh, I think it's because, you know what it is? It's because this is, there we go. I'm still just kind of getting new to how to do this. I'm sorry, everyone. But okay, so what am I talking about? Nodes. Nodes are currently in 19, nodes as of January 1st are in 19, it's at 1950 of Gemini and Sag. And so one of the very interesting things about this in particular is that we're now going into second decan Gemini territory, which I have a lot of experience with, as I have my rising in the second decan of Gemini. And the one way I have experienced this decan of Gemini is that it's the idea of duality. Duality of identity, specifically for me, but because I have my rising there, but also Saturn there. But there's this idea of two seemingly contradicting things that are merged together into one. And there can be this idea, I guess, of swinging from extremes. There can also be this idea, especially with this decan of Gemini, of challenging I think of this as almost like kind of like not even the trickster decan of Gemini, but it's very much this idea of you are two things and one thing at the same time, and then there is this confusion and inner pull between what that is. And so I think of the North Node and the South Node going through here, and when we talk about information, and specifically how Gemini gets this reputation for low-key being fake. It's just because there's the constant absorption of information that is happening to where its mind is flip-flopping a lot. And so I think of specifically when the nodes are transiting this part of Gemini, and they're going to be transiting. I think the nodes will be transiting here for a while, truthfully, in this decan. I don't think the nodes leave here. Yeah, they don't leave here until mid-year. Yeah, they don't leave until mid-year, until around May, which unironically, once they leave that decan, that's also when Jupiter is going to be in Pisces. So that's going to be interesting to kind of think about there. But what am I saying here? Now, what am I saying now? Oh, yeah, I am trying to find some of my notes that I have here. Apologize. But yes, one of the things when we talk about the second decan of Gemini, it is actually one thing that's kind of interesting here is that this is the idea of trying to keep dualities from splitting by maintaining internal coherence. Even though despite that your mental state, actions, thoughts are going to ultimately contradict each other at one point in time. And then there is the idea of there can be a lot of hypocrisy that comes up as a theme for 2021. But also, I think the idea of expanding range of information is ultimately the goal. And it is not, I think Gemini will have a hard, not Gemini in 2021, but more of Gemini as a sign in general has a hard time finding, not necessarily acceptance, but Gemini has a hard time and creates more internal conflict when it chooses the information presented as right and wrong, rather than just presenting that this is one option and that this is one mode of looking at something. When there is a divisiveness that comes with this decan, as opposed to the third decan of Gemini, which is where there needs to be divisiveness that is taken between these two options and these two polarities. When you go into the second decan, choosing is not necessarily choosing in a way that favors one over the other is much more detrimental than it is constructive. And so I think when we see the eclipses in this we see the nodes in this part of Gemini and Sag, we're going to be seeing these ideas of what we are trying to expanding is range. People are going to be expanding their range. And depending on what houses these nodes fall in, I think the second decan of Gemini is much about being multifaceted. And there's the idea of multifacetedness with this decan. And so I think I don't think we're necessarily going to have eclipses in here. I mean, we can take a look at the eclipse charts going into 2021. Let me just pull up these events by date. So our first eclipse that we get is actually going to be a lunar eclipse in the first decan of Sagittarius. But I mean, this first lunar eclipse is going to be really interesting. I mean, I don't really want to bounce around too much, but one of the things I will say about these eclipses is that they are very potent this year. I mean, if we just take a look at this eclipse in general right now, we're having this eclipse at 5 degrees of Sagittarius. We're going to have Mars in Cancer, Mercury and Venus in Gemini, Saturn in Aquarius retrograde already. But we're also going to be having Jupiter in Pisces during that time direct as the ruler of this eclipse. Now, what implications this brings? This brings the highlighting of I think South Node eclipses are the idea of release, and I don't want to get too graphic here, but the South Node is your butthole. The South Node is that thing in which I'm sorry, I just have to take off these headphones right now just because I can't listen to myself and my ears are killing me right now. But the South Node is your butthole. And I say that to mean that your South Node is very much the principle, the South Node in general is the principle of decrease. It is the tail of the dragon. What comes out of the tail? What comes out of, the tail area, your rear end, your tailbone? It's shit that's coming out. It's release. Sometimes that's not always pretty. And I think especially within this, within this first decan of Sagittarius, one thing that's associated with this decan is the idea of virality, when things go viral. And things have the tendency to go very viral, and things be spread very easily when Jupiter is in its home sign, which Jupiter is. And Jupiter will actually be making, the moon actually, during this eclipse, it would have just separated from Jupiter and then conjoined that eclipse with the moon. And so the way I kind of perceive this is that there is something that happens around this time of the year, from around May 26th, that's starting, where something gets released that's viral, and there is a feeling of like kind of maybe even freedom, like things just, I think maybe people even running rampant a little bit more, and there seems like there is this release, and it's a release that goes into freedom. And I think that's one of the things we kind of see with Jupiter and Pisces as a general theme for 2021 in general, is that there's this, like I kind of already touched on previously, wow, we have this freedom. I'm free. Like, I can do things. I can go outside. I can hug people. I can see you. There's this kind of sweet spot that comes with Jupiter and Pisces throughout the year. However, this, and I'm kind of going to the decans here. This decan of, there's the idea of invisibility with this decan, a Pisces in particular. And so and specifically it's ruled by Saturn and Jupiter. So there's this idea of, invisible guidelines that kind of, that build the structure of the world. There's something very psychological about this as well, this decan, where it's understanding, what's going on underneath the surface. What's going on, but in the depths of the ocean. What does what's it look like down there? Let's take a look at the beauty of the ocean. Of, like, I remember someone on Twitter, I can't remember exactly who posted it, but they were talking about on how Saturn and Pisces is like the coral reef. And I think that's so beautiful, because obviously Pisces is water. But when we look at Jupiter, we're looking at the coral reef here. There's something about Jupiter and Pisces going into here where there's the diving into mystery, and there's something mysterious that is viral, that may be happening underneath the surface, that gets exposed and that gets highlighted or released going into 2021 with this eclipse. Eclipses are generally inauspicious. And so, I think the moon's going from that square to Jupiter going to that eclipse seems like something being tainted. Something beneficial being tainted in a way. And I've been kind of thinking as a general theme for 2021 in general that what kind of happens is, like, again, there's this idea of trying to be mobile in a restrictive environment with Jupiter in Aquarius, and then we get into this little taste of freedom, but for whatever reason, and I kind of talk about, what this reason is that there's some sort of malevolence that inhibits us from being able to keep that freedom, and then we go back into Jupiter and Aquarius, and we're like, oh my god, why are we here again? I thought we left. I thought we found the thing that was, like, especially with the, once Jupiter leaves that third decan of Pisces, it goes third decan of Aquarius, it goes into Pisces. It's like, all right, we're leaving the convention now. We're leaving that behind. We're leaving the way life was. We are throwing that in the trash, and we're leaving that behind. But when we go in, like, Jupiter goes in Pisces, it retrogrades back into Aquarius. It's like, wait, why are we returning here? It's literally the return to home. And not even the return to home, return back to the convention, like I've stated before, only to realize that is not what we wanted. And so there seems like with Jupiter and Pisces as a general theme, that it is understanding the unknown of, this is territory in societal structure that has not been ventured into before. And assessing some of the problems out with that eclipse is going to be very interesting with this, specifically with that, just South Node eclipse going on in there. I think the next eclipse I kind of want to talk about is we have this solar eclipse coming up, which is in Gemini. Wow. It's in Gemini, 1947 of Gemini. And this is one, honestly, I have no idea what to make of this eclipse for me. in particular. Just because this eclipse is literally taking place exactly on my ascendant, and I'm like, oh my god, wow. It's also a Mercury Cazimi that happens at the same time as well. So it's like the Sun, Moon, and Mercury are all joining up in that eclipse, which is... Huh. It is, huh. And... I don't know, honestly. Well, it's not that I don't know, but it's one of those things that seems like with this eclipse in this decan of Gemini, I think of this as, you know, I mean, we had that North Node eclipse going in, not North Node, South Node eclipse of release. Now we have the opposite end, where the Moon is Moon and I think it's K2. I can't remember if Rahu or K2 is the North Node or South. I think K2 is the North Node. But either way, the Sun is being swallowed by the North Node, and the Moon is swallowing the Moon, because it's conjoined the North Node, is swallowing the Sun. And it is in this decan of Gemini, but it's also in this bound of Gemini that is ruled by particularly Mars. And Mars is actually at 29 Cancer during this time. And so I think of this a lot as there is some sort of... I think of this as kind of what I was going back to with the nodes being here in this decan of Gemini, is that there's the idea of things being one or the other. But, you know, there's this idea of duality being encompassed into one thing. And what duality looks like I think of this as... I think of this as like a spork. Like, I don't know if anyone's used those sporks. Like in school, it's like a spoon and a fork. It's like, it's both. Like, it serves both purposes. And it's not to say like this is a spoon or this is a fork, but it's a spork. It's like combining things together in a really weird way. And so there seems like there is this combination of things that are uncomfortable in particular. And there are things that are being brought together and married together that are not comfy. That feel very like, oh my god, we shouldn't like be comfy, we shouldn't be here together. Why are we in the same environment? I say that just because the bound lord of this eclipse is Mars, who is in Cancer. Mars does not like to be in Cancer. Mars is in its it is depressed in Cancer, and when I use the word depression in an astrological sense, the definition of depressed is to push downwards. And so, Mars is being pushed downwards by the nature of Cancer, and I think of this as I think of planets in their depression or being depressed as planets with misdirected energy. And so you think of Mars. Mars is the god of war. Mars is of strife and violence. In Cancer, it's at home. It's like, I think of this as civil war, and not necessarily that civil war is going to break out in the United States. But more of... Oh, I haven't even actually put out the... Where is the... Here we go. I need to put on my modern astrology points. Not necessarily that, like, civil war is, like, breaking out in the United States. But much more of there is fights at home. There is fights between people who share the same space. There is a fight to stop... Like, I think of this as... Oh my god, I'm getting like really violent images coming to mind, which I probably shouldn't share. But there is something about something innocent being tainted and being harmed. There is something with Mars in Cancer that something that is tender being something that is tender is being how do I say? Tenderness is being... Oh my god, I don't want to use, like, really graphic words, but, like, I can only think of graphic words right now. Tenderness is being beaten. Tenderness is being hurt. And so, this eclipse, you know, while it is, like, in this decan, it's like... You know, it seems like two things are coming together that occupy the same space that are not, and specifically it looks like intellectual, something to do with intellectualism, just because there is that Mercury Cazimi that does happen here.
And so I'm a little bit just interested as to see what is happening here. You know, what happens during this time, what themes are coming around. And it is around this time that the Uranus-Saturn square also does happen as well. I think it's actually separating during this time. Actually, it might be applying. No, I think it might be applying to each other, because Saturn's applying, Saturn's applying to Uranus, and Uranus is mutually applying to Saturn at the same time. Some interesting things to think about there. The next eclipse I want to highlight for the year is this lunar eclipse in Taurus, which is going to be very interesting. And I say very, like, with emphasis on very. Oh my god, I hear myself too much. Okay, hold on. I'm not using these headphones. Because I hear myself too much. This lunar eclipse in Taurus is going to be very interesting just because it is conjoined the fixed star Algol, which I kind of briefly mentioned earlier. And if anyone does not know the myth of Algol already, Algol is Medusa. It is the eye of the Gorgon. It is the head of Medusa. And it is in the constellation Perseus. And so it's the cut off head of Medusa. And so, in the myth of Medusa, what happens, and I'm just going to put a little bit of a trigger warning right here, so if you are uncomfortable with the topic of rape, it is important to just kind of, step aside at this point in time, and either leave the room if you're live in Clubhouse, or just kind of, skip ahead a little bit, for a minute or two while I'm talking about Medusa. Greek mythology, though, right? So there's this idea of when Medusa is one of the beautiful women, specifically from northern Africa, who is depicted as having dreads, and from this can deduce that Medusa was a black woman. This is the information that is thrown around as well. I also want to think that the undertones of this story are European beauty standards versus colonization, and how it is a story of colonization in a way, I think, and how and specifically Medusa and a lot of I'm going ahead of myself with this myth. Basically, Medusa, beautiful woman, really beautiful, really amazing, associated with fertility. Actually, there's this motherly characteristic associated with Medusa, in which obviously fertility. I don't think I have much to say about that. Much more to say about that. Fertility tribes, in particular, in northern Africa. And so one of the things that happened is that what's his name? Poseidon, Neptune was decided to rape Medusa in the temple of Athena, or Minvera, and basically Athena just kind of victim blamed the shit out of Medusa, and was like, why are you having sex in my temple? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And so, out of frustration for this, Athena cursed Medusa to not be beautiful anymore, to actually turn uglier, quote unquote ugly, because I think Medusa is still beautiful, quote unquote turn ugly, and then she was given the power where anyone, or she was cursed really, anyone she looks at will turn to stone. And so, there's this idea with Medusa also that there is, her head turned to snakes. She has a head full of snakes now. And that I think one of the very interesting things about Medusa here is that, one, you have Athena, and you have this idea of colonization here with North African fertility cults being tainted by Western mythology, Greek Western mythology. And how, literally, I think if there's any excerpt of colonization in Greek mythology that you can trace back to, it's this myth right here. But so there's this other thing about rage, of home being taken away from not even just home. There's this idea of rage with Medusa. There's this idea of one losing one's head, also just because Medusa was slain by Perseus and had her head cut off by Perseus. That way she would not harm any other men. So Medusa does not have a liking towards men. Medusa and Algol, they are not fond of men. They are not fond of male authority or male figures due to the obvious rape that happened. But also, one of the things that specifically, one of the biggest things that comes out of Medusa is the losing of the head. It also has eclipse-like energy as well, just because the actual star of Medusa is seen as like the blinking star, because it's a binary system, and so it'll actually eclipse itself periodically to where the star will actually disappear. And then there's this idea of things disappearing, going lost, going missing, the head coming off, head being cut off, to tie that in with the myth of Medusa, coming into next year, coming into this myth. But there's the idea of rage that completely consumes someone with Medusa, and complete anger and rage. And I was talking a lot about Medusa on Clubhouse a lot earlier, and how this isn't a rage that people will talk about blind rage. People talk about how you are just people when you get angry, you just completely shut down, and you are there's an irrationality towards rage. However, this is not the case with Medusa. There is a righteous and just rage. Medusa does not like injustice. Medusa is not fond of injustice. Medusa wants things to be just and equal, and so Medusa Algol has the nature of Saturn Mars, really. And so there's this idea of that justice must be served here. And it is through intense rage and expression of that rage that justice is served. And Medusa, specifically with Medusa, there is I think as a culture that has been whitewashed, there is this shaming of rage, and there's this shaming of anything that is not pleasant. Medusa challenges that and says, I want to experience the full range of emotion and have autonomy over myself to be angry at injustice that has happened to me. After being raped by Neptune, only then to be victim blamed by another female god. That isn't just. That is unjust right there. And so Medusa, there is this, I am angry and I'm going to show it. And I'm going to show the rage that has festered inside of me and release that. And there's something very clarifying about Medusa. There's something that is also very realistic about Medusa. I don't necessarily want to say realistic, but there's something connected to reality with Medusa, where because it has the nature of Saturn. Saturn is all about reality, like I've been talking about for the past, I don't know, how long has this been going on? For the past hour and a half. So, having an eclipse on here, we already have Medusa as an eclipse star in general because it's a binary system. But we also have this myth of beheading. Eclipses are seen as the king dying. Eclipses are seen where, as the king dying, as someone who is being dethroned, beheaded, whatever the case may be. One of the things that also comes up is that, this is the eclipse on Algol. Algol already has eclipse-like energy. So this is like double eclipse here. This looks like this is potentially and it's also in the sign of Uranus as well. Like the sign where Uranus is in, is what I meant to say. Oh my god, what I'm just trying to find, I think one of the very interesting things about this eclipse is that we may see some sort of beheading, literally, someone losing their mind. I think the first person that comes to mind is Trump, just because he has his midheaven on Algol. This eclipse on there is not pleasant. It is not a pleasant thing. And so there could be, I'm not just saying for Trump's chart, but as a thing for this eclipse, there could be the idea of losing one's mind, losing one's head. There could be the idea of intense rage coming up as a result of this that sparks some sort of initiative change going into 2020, in 2021, going into 2022, because this is at November 19th, 2021. there is something very I don't necessarily want to say catastrophic about this, but there is something that evokes a release of emotion that happens during this eclipse, and it is something that is this is an eclipse conjoined the North Node. Whereas the South Node eclipse that happened previously in the year was all about release. This is all about, like, I think of this as I mean, it is release in a way, but it is there is the idea with the North Node of being something being consuming, the idea of eating. It's the idea of in the mouth. So there could be something of like screaming coming up with this. I don't know. There's the idea of screaming, there's the idea of rage, like I said, but there is also the idea of insatiable desire to exert and experience the full range of emotions with that North Node there. Because it is insatiable desire. It is insatiability. I think that's a word. I think of this eclipse as a very potent time for experiencing the range of emotions. And just being that it's on Algol there. And the moon is also in Taurus, I will say. The moon is very powerful in the sign of Taurus. The moon is extremely powerful in Taurus. The moon is in its exaltation. And we do have Venus in Capricorn at the same time as well. And one of the things during this part of the year that I will say with Venus in Capricorn is that I think Venus actually enters its shadow period during this time. Yeah, Venus is already in shadow by this point, because Venus is at 12:17 during this eclipse. Venus enters shadow at 11:05 Capricorn, in which it'll come back to that degree, in which it'll re-retrograde back to towards those degrees. And so I think this eclipse is going to bring up a lot of themes that'll come into tie-in with this Venus retrograde as well, which I'm going to get to later again. But these are the eclipses of the year. Like, I think the next eclipse after that, you know, this is a really like intense eclipse that comes up for the 19th. But then once we go into that solar eclipse, this looks a little softer, obviously, because it's in Sagittarius. It's a little bit more changing. It's a little bit more mutable, which talks about change, obviously. But it's not really doing too much crazy. It's not aspecting any planets. Yeah, it's not doing too much crazy shit during this time. Especially this decan of the Sagittarius, though. This is about walking a really dangerous path in this decan. There's something also about this decan associated with like not necessarily honey badgers, but in part. Let me bring up my notes. Hold on. In particular, with this decan, there's the idea of someone who is gonna fight the poisonous snakes, who literally who is going to stand up to poisonous snakes, and not necessarily slay Medusa, because I don't think that's necessarily the case here, but there is snake imagery that's going on with these eclipses, especially with this decan of the solar eclipse. What snakes are going to what snakes have to be beheaded? I think there's this idea of the feminine energy in the world coming into power, and that feminine rage being released. And I think of this as something revolving the feminist movement. In particular, we might see be potent around this time, in which it sparks a rebellion of change in some sort of way. It's also interesting that Saturn is also applying to when we go into this next eclipse here on December 4th, Saturn will be applying to Uranus. Uranus will also be mutually applying to Saturn because it's in its retrograde phase during that time as well. But there's this idea of protection. It's almost very similar to like the second decan of Cancer, where there's this idea of walled garden, but it's the quest through this fire and maintaining strength and integrity while you're getting attacked by snakes. There's a perilous road here that happens with this decan, and so having an eclipse in this decan, I think of this as we are looking for ways to release the modes of like we are. I think of this as almost releasing, the path and I don't necessarily want to say the path, but it's definitely about changing which path we are wandering towards, and I know that sounds very vague, but specifically when we're talking about, I mean, I think this decan of not even the second, the Bound Lord of this eclipse is going to be who is it actually going to be? This is at 12:22. It is going to be Venus, which is actually also really interesting, because Venus will actually almost be in Venus is still in shadow. It's not retrograde, but it hasn't conjoined Pluto yet. Once it conjoins Pluto, it enters this phase where it's like that's like once it conjoins Pluto, it'll then go retrograde. So one of the things I think that's going to be very interesting about this eclipse in particular is it is definitely a tone shift in what do values look like. And I think it's going to tie into the Venus retrograde as well. I think these two eclipses are going to tie into the Venus retrograde. That's actually taking place where the Saturn-Pluto conjunction happened. Going to be right on top of Pluto. These values and the amount of value we place on having authority figures to govern us is going to crumble and be reevaluated. I think one thing that people, a lot of ancient astrologers will talk about is with societal, like, I guess, uprisings, and a change of what society looks like, and the values of society, specifically the Venus retrograde cycles. We already saw that with the Venus retrograde that took place this year in Gemini, but also going into 2021, we had that Venus retrograde at the end of the year, but it's in this decan of Capricorn where it's like we're looking at authority, we're looking at power. Like, you remember that third decan I talked about, ruled by the Sun and Mercury. Who are these people that are, why are we placing so much value on these people? Why don't we just walk that perilous road and, attack? There seems something that's like stabby about this. Mars is also in its exaltation as well. Not exaltation. Mars is in domicile during this time as well, which is also applying to a square with Jupiter at the time as well, which has explosive energy. And we also actually kind of get part of that towards the beginning of this year as well. So like the Mars-Jupiter squares are interesting because this year we get, at the beginning of this year during, actually on Inauguration Day, we get that Mars-Jupiter square. Actually, yeah, we get them. We get that Mars-Uranus conjunction on Inauguration Day. But going into on that week of Inauguration Day, we get that Mars-Uranus, Mars-Jupiter square. Then we get the Mars-Jupiter opposition once Jupiter goes back into Aquarius. Literally the day Jupiter goes back into Aquarius, Mars comes to oppose it. And then after this eclipse, Mars is moving to square Jupiter. So we have this explosive theme at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, but the middle seems like a sweet spot. I low-key think of this as like traveling between dimensions. That may just... ow, shit, I just pulled a muscle. That may just be me. But this looks like time travel. It's time travel that is initiated through change. Yeah, I'm gonna stop talking about these eclipses now, and we're actually gonna get into the forecast for 2021. However, I do need to take a break, so I'm gonna be taking my break here, and I'm gonna be coming back in approximately at let's see, at 5. We'll do 5:55 and take a little bit of a break here. That way we can just kind of then go over the transits going into each year and just kind of do a brief overview of what each month looks like in 2021. So I'm going to just take a little bit of a break right here, and we'll come back to the next. We will be coming back in about 10 minutes. And so for those watching the video version, the edited video version on YouTube, we'll just be back in a second. Oh my god. And so those who are on the live stream, welcome. Hey y'all. Oh my god. I'm not gonna lie. Doing a lot of talking, talking by yourself for an hour and a half is a lot of work. I should also write down that at an hour and 39 minutes is when I have this break, because I'm gonna forget that. I just gotta get a yawn. I gotta get it out because, yeah. But hey, to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in the clubhouse, welcome. Thank you guys for sticking around. I know some of you guys have stuck around for this past 2 hours. So thank you for sticking around. I appreciate it. We are going to hold on. Oh my god, I'm just gonna kind of shut up for a second, just because I really need to. Because, I'm just so, yeah. Okay, so we're doing this forecast, yes. I really hope I don't go over time with these next few briefings, pretty much. Oh my god, if I have 20 minutes, I'm trying to think about how to structure this. Let's see, if I do 15 minutes for each month times 12, how many minutes is that? It's 180 minutes. Oh my god. And divided by 60, that's another 2 hours. Okay. That's 3 hours? Oh, Lord. That is 3 hours right there. Okay. Okay. I guess I'm going to be talking for 3 hours then. I don't think that's how it'll be though, but we'll see. Probably gonna fix my hair a little. I'm actually growing my hair out. Hopefully it's gonna be nice and be a lot nicer once I grow it out. Just gotta get these yawns out. Woo! God damn. Low key? Oh my god, low key, I kind of want to record part 2 another time because I've already done 2 hours of this. You know what? I think that may be what I'll do actually. You know what? I can't do all this in one day. I'm doing part 2 tomorrow. Alright? So, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing part 2 tomorrow because I literally cannot talk anymore right now, and I have to just, yeah, I have to. So, thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to be doing part 2 tomorrow for going month by month. That way I just have a little bit more time and a little bit more energy to do this because I also want to see sunset too at the beach. So, I would prefer to do that as well. So thank you guys everyone for joining. Catch me tomorrow. I think I can't promise if it'll be at 2 o'clock the same time that I'll be doing this forecast. However, we're going to be looking at pretty much the entirety of 2020 in depth now, month by month, since we've already gone through a lot of preliminary stuff over the past 2 hours. So thank you everyone, and we'll see you back in part 2.